Welcome to AI Insights, Tomorrow's Tech Today, where we explore the frontiers of general AI. I'm your host, Thomas Siebenhüner, and today I'm happy to welcome a fellow Reply colleague and renowned AI expert on our podcast, James Chamberlain. James has a strong background in Google Cloud, of course, AI, machine learning, and mobile development. He has recently written a white paper titled The Cloud's Offering on Generative AI. So, together with James, we will explore how generative AI is transforming cloud computing and what an AI future in the cloud might actually look like. Good to have you on the show, James.
Hey Thomas, glad to be here. Excited to get into this discussion. I think it's a really important one that a lot of people are having around the world at the moment. So yeah, really excited to get started with it.
Awesome. So, then I would say let's directly cut to the chase. The white paper begins by positioning generative AI as a dominant trend. Could you explain how cloud computing has democratized access to generative AI technologies, and what are the key barriers to the entry of that enterprise phase today?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the whole democratized aspect of generative AI is an interesting one because it really comes back to the kind of the foundations of cloud and why they came about in the first place of this democratized computing. So suddenly, as of 10, 15 years ago, with the rise of AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. There's now this world where you don't need server racks in your back garden or in your offices. You have access to all of this compute available all around the world in all regions and zones. You don't have to worry about scaling. You don't have to worry about failover or recovery. You just have access to it, and a lot of the time, if you do it right, it just works. And that extends to a lot of things, and obviously what we're talking about today is generative AI. There's been so many over the past 5-ish years generative AI startups, and part of the reason we've seen so many is because of that democratized access to compute. I mean, generative models, large language models, they're expensive to train. They cost a lot of money. You see figures of, I think GPT-3 was in the hundreds of millions of pounds to train, which is huge, and not something that's kind of possible for everyone to just be able to do in their rooms. But small scale companies, if they get some initial investment, they can begin to go down that road of doing compute and doing generative AI because of that accessibility that's given from cloud. And I think it goes further than compute as well. One of the difficulties with generative AI is it is a kind of new paradigm of
Hmm.
computing. And so it's this democratization of skill as well. And I think cloud providers are really good at providing models in relatively easy to use kind of scenarios. So you have model gardens where you can access Anthropic's models and Mistral's models and OpenAI's models with 4 or 5 lines of code. You can be up and running. Hugging Face is a open platform that's particularly strong in this, and all the cloud providers have partnerships with Hugging Face, and it is this community of data sets and models around making it easy to access. So I think cloud's done a lot, and I think the open source community's done a lot there as well.
Um, ChatGPT was kind of the iPhone moment,
Mm.
for AI. So reflecting on the historical perspective provided, in your white paper, how significant was the release of ChatGPT and other language models or large language models in accelerating the adoption of generative AI?
Yeah, I think ChatGPT is really fascinating because certainly to the world, it felt like a big surprise that now we can do all of this stuff with language that we weren't able to do before. I think to the research community, in AI and natural language processing, it wasn't so much of a surprise. And so I think it's fascinating because it was the first time it really been put out into the open world, to the public, and just said, have at it, have a go. This is where the research is. We've packaged it up into a kind of nice web application and have a go. And I think the explosion it created, I mean, something like the fastest app ever to 1 million users. It beat Twitter, it beat Facebook, it beat kind of everything. Um, it made a lot of other companies suddenly kind of take stock and go, hold on, people seem to think OpenAI is the only company doing this.
Hmm. Hmm.
Google and DeepMind have been doing it for years and years. I mean, obviously, large language models, the basis of that as a technology is attention, uh, uh, paradigm technology that Google pioneered in 2017, and Facebook, Meta have been researching for years, as of Microsoft, who obviously invest a huge amount of money in OpenAI. Um, so it's a fascinating inflection point, and I think it's just now a race to the finish line, wherever that finish line is. It's just a race there.
What distinguishes, enterprise grade solutions from consumer products in this space?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and one we come across within Reply, talking to clients and organizations all of the time. I think there's a big education piece there around this difference between an enterprise product and a consumer product. So consumer products, I think the easiest difference to kind of point out is consumer products like ChatGPT, or like the public version of Gemini, or Claude from Anthropic, collect your data. It's not private. Everything you type in is then sent back around the loop, using reinforcement learning to train the model to become better at kind of responding to questions, and understanding prompts. When you come to enterprise products, so whether it's in Azure AI Service, or Amazon Bedrock, or Google Vertex AI, we have this notion of kind of tenant projects. So you have the base model that lives in the cloud somewhere, but then a kind of version of it, if we think about it abstractly, a version of it is put into a tenant project that is ring fenced by your organization. And so any data that you put into that, any prompt you put into that, doesn't go any further. It doesn't go back to train the model. It doesn't inform your ads that you see on your phone, or on your laptop, or on Facebook.
Due to security, I would assume, or what's the reason for that?
It's security and trust is the main thing. I
Hmm.
mean, you can imagine public sector. Let's take public sector, where a lot of what they do requires security clearance. And so they can't be putting anything and everything into ChatGPT that's open to the world, and being trained on, because there's essentially, the way the technology works is the likelihood that everything you put into ChatGPT could come back out the other end at some point with it hallucinating. So
Hmm.
if you tell it that, I don't know, there's a big deal going on between a sports franchise and a technology company, well then technically that's available for everyone to see because it's trained in the model.
Is there anything else, that enterprises or people who establish such a model on their side need to take into consideration?
Yeah, I would say it's understanding how these models are used and what they're good at. Um, you know, if we think from a creative perspective, these generative models are really good at providing creativity, and a bit of influence and ideation around, you want to create a marketing campaign, and it can generate copy around maybe descriptors, and headlines, and subtitles, and then imagery as well, and you can fine tune it on your company's data. Um, it's really good at that sort of thing. I think there's a bit of an education around, it's not just there to solve everything. Machine learning is a field that's been going since, well, I mean, since the 20th century. We
Hmm.
don't have to solve everything with generative AI. Sometimes we talk to clients, and they present us with problems, and they say, let's solve these with generative AI. And occasionally the conversation is, okay, great, we could. Um, it's a bit overkill, and it's maybe not even the most optimal solution. Why don't we use some more traditional techniques? Take I don't know, contract analysis. Sure, you could feed a contract into ChatGPT, say, and it will read it, and give you some insight. But actually, optical character recognition is something that we've been able to do for a very long time. And so you can kind of break that apart, and we can make a simplified pipeline, as opposed to just chucking everything into a large language model, which is expensive, can be expensive in the back end to train and fine tune. So I would say it's realizing what they're good at and what they're not good at is the key bit of learning, I think, that's appropriate. And also, you know, how do you prompt well? Prompt engineering's a job that arose over the past 2 years, and you can get paid a lot of money for it, because it's not trivial. I think you feel that you can put in natural language, and so it will understand everything. But there are ways to make it understand better. Being more prescriptive about what you want. I mean, these are kind of next word predictors, if you like. And so often, finishing your prompt with a dot dot dot, so to speak, of
Hmm.
go on from here,
Yeah.
it's generally a lot better in that situation, because that's what it's trained to do.
Okay. Okay. Understood. Um, so maybe let's take a look, into the cloud's role in facilitating generative AI. So your analysis in the white paper highlights different approaches by major cloud providers. Can you discuss how these strategies, from enterprise ready applications to open ecosystems, shape the development and deployment of generative AI solutions?
Yeah, yeah. Generally, I think all the major cloud providers, you kind of see them honing in on a similar sort of strategy, which is we'll provide our own in-house models, which are generally closed source, but maybe come with more security considerations. And then also they provide access to these open source models. And they do these in kind of low code, no code ways, which I think is really important in terms of getting generative AI out there to enterprises and out there to businesses in a kind of safe and predictable way. Not everyone is trained to be a generative AI engineer and can code these models in Python, in TensorFlow and PyTorch and all of that. And so there's kind of a unified strategy around, okay, we can give you access to the models as a basis, but let's provide a whole load of stuff on top. So do you want to create agents or chatbots? Well, we can do a lot of the work for you behind the scenes, to make that possible. Think about Google Cloud and the idea of Google search. So if you're given a foundation model, you can create your own search mechanism where you type in a query and it will search over documents and corpora and give you an answer back. Well, actually, Google can do a lot of the heavy lifting for that for you because they know how to create search experiences. They've been doing it for 20, 30 years. And so providing more out of the box solutions is, I think, where we see enterprises moving to as they, I think, get more of an understanding of what the use cases are. There's a bit of a rush at the moment to work out what the use cases are. Obviously, creativity, creative applications, marketing content is a big one, and then also being able to derive insight from a lot of data over a lot of different places. But as we discover more of these use cases, I think you'll see a kind of unified strategy around out of the box products that do those specific things and allow enterprises to kind of go from there.
Let's look a little bit into the part of ethics, James. So
Mm.
ethics obviously play a significant role, in the deployment of generative AI. Based on the concerns that you outlined in the white paper, how are cloud providers addressing these issues of model bias, misinformation, and environmental impact?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a bit of a, for the umbrella topic of ethical considerations, I think there's a bit of a shared responsibility there between cloud providers and between the organizations and the people who use these models. Certainly in terms of model bias, I mean, that's hugely dependent on how these models are trained, and there's a lot of work that goes into creating synthetic data. So a good example is, earlier this year there was some image generation applications who were creating images based on prompts, and they were asked by users to create historical prompts. So Victorian people from the Victorian time, or people in the 1700s, who would have been in the US at the time, and the model was kind of overcompensating bias wise, and so no matter what era of history or what specifically you asked it, it would show every kind of ethnicity, every
Mm,
kind of
mhm.
cultural type of person in the results. And there were some really awful examples of where, someone had typed in German soldiers from 1945 and you'd see um, kind of English or African or kind of East Asian people show up in the image results. And of course, that's taking it to the nth degree. And I think that's typically you see the big organizations struggle a bit with model bias where they overcompensate, and err on the side of let's be safe, let's make sure we're doing this properly. And then you have the open source community, which generally is a bit more hands off. I think Mistral is a good example again, um, where they really don't do a huge amount of kind of pre-prompting or fine-tuning of what you put into it. It's fairly open, and there's kind of fewer safety regulations around it. Um, I think misinformation this year more than most is really important. With it being an election year in both the US and the UK, we kind of saw around 2016 with the US election again, some of the votes in the UK and the kind of Cambridge Analytica scandal, where suddenly data was really powerful and was having a bit of an influence, or potentially having an influence, on voters and being able to kind of access and advertise and market to them in different and novel ways that are more targeted and more related to each individual. I think over the past 2 years with ChatGPT, with Gemini, with everything coming out, I'm sure you've seen over Twitter all the news, deep fakes and being able to create fake imagery or fake audio or even fake video. I've seen a lot recently where you have imaginary interviews between two characters that have obviously it's never happened. How do we deal with that as a community, as a nation, is I think a wider question. Because it will get out there. I think social media companies try and control what gets put on their platforms,
Hmm.
but with generative AI and the democratization of generative AI, we're going to see more of it, and it may not be super obvious to begin with. Um, but I'm kind of fascinated to see its effect on the elections because I'm sure it will have a big one.
Yeah. So let's really take the election part as an example. What kind of not trying to trigger our audience to actually do that, but what could possibly happen with misuse of generative AI in perspective of the elections?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different areas. One of them is being able to create hyper specific and targeted marketing at scale. So using generative AI to not just target people, but do it really quickly. So generating 10,000 different types of advertising material to swing voters is
Okay.
something that we saw a bit with Cambridge Analytica, but generative AI suddenly means it's more personalized. You can do it quicker, and so I just think it will be hard to for social media companies to stay in control of that. And then also one which I've seen recently, which is it's really incredible, is being able to clone voices from I think 5 or 6 seconds worth of audio,
Yeah.
which is tiny. Um, and again, you can create imagery, you can create videos, you can create audio. But suddenly you can kind of create anything almost. Fake interviews where a particular political figure makes a comment that maybe you wouldn't agree with, and suddenly it's swinging your vote a bit.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Again, generative AI just makes it possible to do all of this at scale. That's kind of I think unseen, at least in the past 10, 20, 30 years.
Okay. How can corporates deal with that? Is there any technology that can at least pin down the fake ones from the real ones?
Yeah, I think you see so a bigger kind of research endeavor ever since the kind of birth of ChatGPT and all of that has been digital watermarking. So you've seen it. I think some schools, students using ChatGPT to write essays or answer questions have done some work in digital watermarking, being able to catch out this was generated using ChatGPT. I think through some reverse engineering, and then Google DeepMind at the end of last year. So their image generation tool is Imagine, and they have this technology called SynthID, which generates a digital watermark in the image, and so it's very very easy to detect. Okay, this was generated using this model. It's not real. That's easy to control for the big companies and for the enterprise products from OpenAI, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. I think it becomes harder in the open source world um, when suddenly people are able to take these models and reconstruct them and build them in their own way.
Hmm.
I think an industry standard around digital watermarking is an approach, um, but it's the kind of the negative part of democratization is suddenly you start to lose a bit of control that you
Yeah.
have when everything's centralized, but as soon as it gets dispersed, uh, you know, it gets harder.
Yeah. Is there any way and means for us normal people to identify or at least try to ask the right questions whether something is fake or not, or are we just really do we need to accept the fact that everything could be fake or is not, whatever it is?
It's a real kind of dystopian look, isn't it? Can
Isn't
can
it?
you
Isn't
trust
it? Yeah.
anything you see online? There's an argument to say that even before generative AI, should you be trusting everything you see online? Um, but I think it's a bit of a reality we have to live in, that there's going to be a proportion of stuff that is fake, and we have to kind of do our best to do our own research. You see, I mean, there's a lot of kind of focus on social media companies. Do they do enough? It's an incredibly hard problem. If let's remove digital watermarking and let's just say, how can we detect fake content? These companies, Meta, X, have thousands and thousands and thousands of people who trawl through everything on these platforms and try and detect fake content. It sounds a painful job, and I really commend those people. But community-driven initiatives are useful as well. So occasionally on X, if you're scrolling through, you might see a community note of, no, by the way, this didn't happen. It was actually this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think initiatives like that are really positive. So allowing the people who use the platform to contribute, and then you can kind of upvote and downvote, challenging the true stuff and reinforcing the fake stuff.
It's dystopian indeed. It really sounds dystopian to a certain degree.
Yeah, it's a reality we have to live in, but I think we just have to be more conscious. Do your own research and talk to people, and as long as as a country, as a community, we keep open conversations, then we're fine. You often hear about these kind of siloed digital worlds where you're recommended the same content you research, and so you end up further in whatever direction you currently swing to.
Yeah.
I think that's where we get problems. Keeping as much of an open mindset and open discussion is what will save us in this dystopian world we've described.
Okay. Right. Let's see if we can have like a positive notion towards the end. So,
Yeah.
James, the white paper concludes with a forward-looking perspective on generative AI.
Mm.
What emerging trends do you anticipate will shape the future of generative AI in the cloud, and how should enterprises prepare to leverage these advancements?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because it's a field that moves so fast. I get newsletter and email updates from all of the big kind of AI organizations, and it feels like every 6 hours I get a new notification that something new's been announced. Um, the fascinating bit about looking forward is this idea of emergent capabilities. So, and what that means is, as these models get bigger, as they have more parameters and they grow, a lot of the time we don't exactly know what they'll be able to do, until someone prompts it and finds out, oh, it can now do this. And that's been the case for the past 5-10 years really, of when deep learning became more popular. And so there's an element of, as we grow these models, we will then find out what's possible. But I think that perhaps a slightly more interesting kind of analysis now is, we have these big foundation models, Gemini, Claude, and GPT-4. Are we heading towards a one model future where you have this one model that does absolutely everything? Or what is maybe more likely, and Demis Hassabis, the CEO of Google DeepMind, talked about this, I think, last year, um, having a kind of multiple specialized models outlook. So you have maybe ChatGPT is your entry point, and it understands what you want to request. But then the actual doing of the actions and the processing isn't all handled by this one huge model. It moves to more specialized models for what they're good at. You see that with image generation. Um, you know, ChatGPT hands off to DALI, Gemini hands off to Imagine. Using more specialized, smaller models that will provide quicker responses, will be friendlier to the environment because they won't be as big. And then also will provide probably better results because they're specialized, fine-tuned, grounded in that exact task, or process. So I think that's something we'll see more of. I think we're in this world right now of, let's just make bigger, make bigger, make bigger, and see what's possible.
Hmm.
I expect that to change a bit, at least in terms of how enterprises use generative AI. I mean, generative AI is cheap right now for end users because it's just a race to the bottom of organizations trying to get users and bring them into their walled garden, if you like. Um, but I imagine there'll come a point where it's, no, we want a specialized model for contract analysis, and document tracking, or for creative endeavors. I think that's much more likely.
Okay. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this last question that I'm going to ask you very much, because there's this sound effect, in the Zencaster app that I'm using in order to record this. And I've never had a use case, but I think now I do actually. So, James, what's your perspective, your take, your prediction on the cloud's offering on generative AI? Is it rather bright, or is it going to be cloudy? It's so bad, but I had to do it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I feel like, do you even want an answer to the question, or was it just ask it so you can play
No,
the play
I
the
really,
devil?
I really indeed want an answer to the question. So, what's your personal take on the future, of clouds AI there?
I would say it's bright. I would say it's bright. I mean, we're seeing, as I said, the advancements are so rapid, and one of the challenges is keeping up with it and understanding what's available. When we go to conferences and talk to organizations, the bit they find difficult is actually understanding what they can do and what they can use to empower their employees, or to improve their customer outreach. Um, that would be the hardest thing to keep control of. We have Google Next going on this week in Las Vegas in America, where some of our guys are over there,
Yeah, yeah.
and you have all of their big announcements at the moment, and you're kind of filtering through all the videos, all the blog posts, making sure you don't miss anything.
Hmm.
So it's bright, but it's a challenge to keep up with it, and I think that's where you'll see the most value for organizations, is understanding what to use and when, um, and hopefully that will kind of keep the future bright, as opposed to this cloudy mess of AGI and dystopian futures, and can we trust anything?
Yeah.
Let's try and stay positive.
Okay.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, James, thank you for your time. Thank you for the insights that you've offered us on, the cloud's offering on generative AI. And with that, I wish you a good weekend.
Thanks, Thomas. You too. Cheers for having me.